welcome to The Sacred Journey. The Sacred Journey is the program that reminds you that life is a wonderful adventure, and each and every experience we have is a unique and perfect opportunity for learning. I'm Joyce St. Germain, and I'm back with author, researcher, and experiencer Mike Cleland, and we're presenting Owls and UFO Contact. This is the second of two parts. We're at the Doctor's Inn at Saranac Lake in the Adirondacks on a 0-degree wonderful winter day. A nice cozy fire, so welcome, join us. Mike, we just dug in last episode, and you have so much more to share, so thank you for once again sharing your experience, knowledge, research. Sum up a little bit about what we covered in last show so that people can remember or be intrigued and find out what we did and look us up.
I have been researching owls and their association with direct UFO contact. That could be abduction, that could be a close-up sighting, but I feel strongly there's very few things I will say with certainty. I will say with absolute certainty and conviction, owls and UFOs are connected. How they are connected, I have no idea. But I'm saying that people will have powerful experiences with an owl in conjunction with a powerful experience with a UFO. Now, as I said earlier, it's not just UFOs. It is other highly charged human experiences. Meditation, shamanic initiation, mushrooms. People taking mushrooms see owls. Dreams, and death. So those 5 things. All of those things I consider, you can have a transformational experience with any of those. You can have a dream that changes your life. Oh, and synchronicity. And synchronicity is another one. So you can have a synchronicity that changes your life. I've talked to people who have had owl experiences that have changed their lives. And so there's a power in this animal. It's not just a bird with big eyes. It's a symbolic archetype that interacts with people at highly charged moments.
Okay, that sums it up beautifully. And we did say in the last show, and we agreed, sometimes an owl's an owl's an owl, and seeing an owl is just an ordinary part of nature.
Yes, but I will also add that owls are very beautiful, and they have a majesty to them. So when you see an owl, like I talk to people all the time, and they're like, sometimes people rub me the letter. I saw an owl in my yard the other day. It was so beautiful. It had such a presence.
They are breathtaking.
They are breathtaking.
Yes,
People don't,
absolutely.
No one's saying that about bunny rabbits.
Well, they're saying, they're so cute.
They can certainly, bunny rabbits have their own charm, but it ain't the same power and majesty of an owl. Yeah.
But you correspond it sometimes to an experience and an owl, not just an owl sighting. Of what were you thinking, what were you experiencing, what was happening?
Yes, so when people have, so at this point I lump 3 things together. They are all the same. Obviously they're not the same, but for my thought experiment, owls, synchronicities, and UFOs, I treat them all the same. I weight them all the same. Someone has a powerful owl experience, I will say, what were you talking about in the moments leading up to that? What was going on in your life in the moments leading up to that owl sighting? And then conversely, I'll say, what changed in your life after the owl sighting? What changed in the moments after that? And so I'm seeing the owl as a totem of the transformational experience. We're jumping into the deepest waters right now. The owl is a symbolic totem of a transformational experience. So here I'll tell a story. Woman contacted me. And my cat's showing up. I'm going to pet her for a moment.
That's Dazzy.
I don't know if you can see her. She may jump in her lap. If you watch part 1, you'll get to see the kitty. So here, let's put her in her. Come on. Okay, so she's a grandmother. She contacted me. In her teenage years, she was very depressed. And she was going to commit suicide. And she got in her car, I think it was her parents' car, and she had a hose and a pillow. She was going to put the hose from the tailpipe into the car, and she brought a pillow so she could lay down in the back seat and die. She had a spot all picked out in the woods, where she was going to park the car, this little turnoff. She's driving through the woods at night, knowing she was going to kill herself. She is just about to turn into the turnoff. A white owl flies right up to the windshield, and she says she's slowing down to make the turn. The owl comes in, she makes a full stop, the owl flaps its wings, and she felt like this eternity staring into the owl's eyes. And the owl flew off. She turned around and came home, and she's still alive. So that owl unmistakably influenced her life, saved her life, a transformative experience. I have that. I used to call that a one-off. I used to talk about that, and I'd say that's just a one-off. There's only one experience that I have in my. I'm very cautious if I don't have a pattern to include a story. But I thought that story had so much power. I have since heard that story several other times in one form or another.
Interesting. I want to remind our viewers that you are the author of The Messengers, Owl Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. And you just gave a stories from The Messengers, accounts of owls, UFOs, and a deeper reality. And if someone were to Google owls and UFOs, there you are. And there you are, and there you are, and there you are. And on and on. So,
it's like I've said this before, like owls, I did not choose owls. Owls chose me. And so the owls have been, like you give a thread, right? You pull on that thread. You don't know where it's going. And so it leads to one thing, and then that one thing has another thread connected. You pull on that, and then that has another thread. And that has been the sort of focus of my journey. I'm not very formal in my research. I'm very intuitive, and I'm much more an artist than a pragmatic researcher. I try to be really buttoned up in my research, but I have to recognize that some of these stories have the feel of a parable, right? We talked about this a little before, where it's tough to overanalyze them. Like, I don't have to say much about that story of the woman driving at night, a young teenager going to kill herself and seeing an owl. I don't have to add anything to that story. That story speaks for itself. Some of them, oftentimes when these stories are side by side, there's a like increased power to the knowing that people have very similar stories.
do you find this happens more in different parts of the world than others, or not necessarily?
Well, not necessarily. There's owls all over the world. So, and even if it didn't, even if someone was in Antarctica, I'm certain they could have an owl experience that might show up some other way, on a coffee cup or on a T-shirt or something, or dream.
Yeah, an image of one. Interesting. Would you share another story that is? Well, they're all pretty profound.
No. Okay, so here's a friend of mine named Ben. I like this story because it gives the flavor and the sort of absurd quality to this. My friend Ben experiences, and he's very cautious, in which I understand completely. Very cautious to not say, I'm a UFO abductee. That said, he does describe all the things that someone who's had a UFO contact might say. So I'll just leave it at that. He's had some powerful experiences. So he was with his kids in the van, and they're coming back from a roller skating party. They all went roller skating for the birthday. Van full of kids, he's driving, it's nighttime, and they're like, tell a story. And he said, I'll tell you some stories. And he was like, car full of kids, I'll just tell my UFO contact experience stories. And he said he framed a little bit like a campfire story, and he'd never told them. And he told story after story after story. And the final culmination that was a story where he had missing time. And anyone who's familiar with UFO research, missing time, the implication is something happened in those unaccountable hours. So he gets to the final story. He's driving, and the moment he finishes the story, he gets to the punchline of the story. An owl flies across. Actually, it's not true. It flies over the car and leads the car down the road for a while. And he thinks to himself, like, oh my God, that is so corny. Like, an owl, that is so corny. That's so typical. It's so corny. Why couldn't it have been a bear? And at that moment, this black thing runs across the road, and a little boy sitting in the front seat goes, look, a bear! It turned out to be a big black dog, but the boy said a bear. And, can I get up here? Come on. So, So it turned out. So he said it happened simultaneously. Finishing the story, owl in the windshield, look, a bear. The thought, why an owl should have been a bear. So, and now, so that was, he was revealing himself the first time he told. So the first time he shared his stories with his family, the first time. Powerful, boom, boom, boom. The punchline, powerful synchronistic events with an owl. Later, he takes the kids out hiking, and they walking down the path through the woods, and there's an owl in a tree, and it watches them walk by, and they walk down the path, and then the owl flies, lands on another tree, and they pass the owl again, and then flies, and they pass the owl again. And this has happened to me too. Same experience of an owl flying on a path. The kids loved it. They thought it was the coolest thing ever. Ben was a little creeped out, you know. So Ben then that night, the kids say, he's like, I'll go up and read you a story. The kids were little at this time. I think they're a little older now, but they were very little at the time. So he's going to go up and read him a story. So he said, pick a book. So they pick a book called Say Boo. Now this is a little kid's book. It's got cartoons in it. It's about a ghost named Ben. And Ben the ghost has lost his voice, and he can't say boo, so he can't scare anyone. So it's Halloween is coming, he's got to be able to scare people, he can't scare people. So he walks up to the cow, and he tries to scare the cow, and he goes, moo! I mean, you can see where this is going, right? So he walks up to a friendly owl, and he says, whoo! So I actually I got to footnote this book in the little kid's book so he's reading aloud, and he says, reads the kids, he says, and then Ben looked up into a big pine tree and saw an owl. And right then the dog starts barking. Arf, 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 the dog's barking downstairs. So he runs downstairs. What's going on? Why is the dog freaking out? He opens the door. There's nothing there. He's drawn to look upward. And Ben looks up into a big pine tree and sees an owl. And those are the last words he spoke. So now when you do this, so like to write someone else's story, it's not my story, it's his story. So you have to write it, I have to send it to it. It's an incredibly time-consuming process, but I feel very strongly that the stories are accurate to what people have shared. So I sent the story to Ben, and he got back to me. So he changed a few things, the perfect stuff, and it was very helpful to have him help. And he said, you know what? These are the same stories. Like, I was trying to find my voice in the van. And Ben the ghost was trying to find his voice. These are the same stories. So it was a story of him finding his voice. This one, there's no UFOs in this. It's not scary. But this one story has that twinkle of magic. It has that mood. It has that vibe. I mean, I don't need to overanalyze it. Ben said it clear enough. They're the same story. Ben was trying to find his voice.
That's perfect. You know we want to hear more.
Okay, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to push the fire here. So we're going to get some nice, good little visual effects there. The flames should come back to life. Yeah. Healing. When you ended up the last one, we started talking about. We mentioned healing. Now, healing in the second book shows up. It shows up in the first book. Now, here's something I do when I talk to someone on the phone, when I make notes and stuff like that. I just write on the page. You know, like, how old are you? When were you born? Like, it's very simple questions. You know, like the questions I ask: are you creative type? Are you? What's your psychic skills? And then I write Reiki, and I wait for them. And it's not all of them, obviously, but it is an absurd number of people say, oh, I'm a Reiki healer. I'm a master Reiki healer. And so people having UFO and owl accounts are also Reiki healers. Reiki is are you a Reiki healer? Aren't you?
I'm a Reiki master, however, I use shamanic healing methods because they align more with who I am. So I will just say energy healer or energy healing. But so you probably have people that don't define themselves as energy healers because they don't do Reiki, but they might do shamanic energy healing.
I obviously have to be loose with my definitions. Yes, so I'm a guy, a fellow contact, with a powerful set of experiences as a nurse, male nurse. So he's a healer, like, no doubt about it. Now, there was a UFO conference going back a few years ago, and a bunch of folks went to a lake house. This is in Maine, in northern Maine. There was a conference itself was in Portland, Maine, and then afterwards, very small conference, not 30 people maybe in the room for the presentations, and then a handful of folks all went up to this house in Maine and hung out together for a couple nights over the weekend. They all sat around the campfire and said, let's go down to the lake. And they all did this. It was funny because a lot of them were women, and there was kind of like this kind of new age one-upmanship. And they're like, I'm going to manifest it like this. Oh, I'm going to think of glowing white light. And another person would say, oh, no, you do it with this chant. Another person said, oh, no, you do it with your intention just by... And everyone was pointing to this one spot. And I was there for a while. And it was like the energy was like too amped up. Like I was like, ooh, I got to leave. So I was walking away, and I heard everyone go, wow! And I ran back down there, and they said, right where they had been pointing, like this orb appeared, and then disappeared, like this big. So later that night, Pam and Carol, well, let me back up a little bit. Suzanne and Jack, my friends Suzanne and Jack. Suzanne's the editor of the second book, and has had a lot of owl experiences. Suzanne is sitting, and there's a bird on an island in a tree, and she takes a picture. There's not much to see in the picture. She said she saw it fly away. There's really it's a little teeny dot in the picture, but she said it was an owl. So that's on the lake. There was an owl that afternoon. And I talked to Jack, and Jack, this was totally like hanging out at the beach, little thing. It was a small little beach, but hanging out in the woods in a cabin and stuff. And Jack's drinking a beer in his lawn chair, and he's like, I'm turning into my dad. I am turning into my dad. I hear my dad's voice coming out of my mouth. It feels like my dad's here. He says that during the day. So later on that night, it was about midnight or 1 in the morning when that flash appeared. So then everyone like, woohoo, we saw a UFO. Everyone went to bed. And it was a cold kind of autumn night, and it was down, you get down by the lake, and it's damp and clammy, and like it was tough to hang out there. So Pam and Carol go and sit, and they're sitting on the grass at the lake. And they're talking, and it was just after the thing, so it would have been about 1 in the morning, and all of a sudden they're talking, and they look at their watch, and it's 4:30 in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning. And they're like, what? Like, how did that happen? Like, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, it's 4 in the morning. And this would have been a tough place to sit for 3 hours. I mean, it was cold. And they were scared. They both had experiences, and they knew
So you're thinking this may be missing time, not necessarily we were so engaged in conversation.
Oh, no. I've talked to them both of them at length. They were like, something happened. They had missing time. They knew it. They both were very aware of everything. They were at a UFO conference. They're lifelong friends, and they come back. And so the scene at the house is small, and so a lot of people are camped in these tents. And the lawn is kind of small, so all these tents were all pushed together, and people are all sleeping in these tents. So they go in their tent, and they're scared. They're shook up. And Carol says, let's ask the owl if we did, in fact, have UFO contact, if something happened. And boom, right at that moment, an owl hoots. And there's a pause. And then the owl hoots again, and it's louder. It's closer. And then the owl hoots a third time. And it's right above the tent, and it's actually doing something where it's like branches and sticks are falling on top of their tent. And it's loud. Jack is in the tent right next to them, Jack and Suzanne. Jack wakes up, looks at his phone. Here's the owl, looks at his phone. Like, what time is it? And it's 4:20 in the morning. Immediately, 4:20 was the day his father died on April 20th. Immediately, he recognizes an owl hoots, his father's death. He was talking about his father was present.
Here, yeah.
So here we have 2 tents side by side. Jack's an experiencer, Pam and Carol are experiencers. 1 owl. They asked, did we have contact? The owl not only hoots, but pushes sticks on top of their tent. Jack, the tent next to him, hears an owl, symbolically reminded of the death of his father. 1 owl, 2 tents, 2 completely different symbolic meanings. These are the symbolic meanings. These are highly charged. So, owls and death is very common. Owls in connection with death. And then owls in connection with UFO contact. So this story is perfect. Now I'll also say, all 3 of the players are Reiki masters.
Okay, so all energy healers.
Energy healers, yes.
Interesting.
So like we could spend an hour trying to like back engineer and pull the threads and unpack and how did this all happen, and
Well, we have 4 minutes left. Not
oh
hours,
okay, so it's
but-
4 minutes. Okay, I did talk. I got on the roll there. So these books. So the books when you put them side by side, they're darn close to 400 pages of owl stories. The stories I told one after another, after another, after another, and I am still mystified as to the deeper meaning. I know what I can say is there is a deeper meaning. What that is a little more elusive.
And I'm not sure that it's necessary to know what that is, just to be open that something wonderful or wondrous is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you like to take us in our last few minutes?
Um,
How's that for open?
the owl connection is a symbolic connection. It's a metaphor made real. I am convinced that these ancient mythologies, these ancient folklores had their roots in real experiences. People had real experiences with owls in highly charged moments, often associated with death. That's where the folklore comes from. And these experiences are still taking place today. They're still happening. These modern stories, there's a thread connected to these ancient mythologies. There's nothing new about the stories that I've just told. Those are part of the human experience, and they are the source of our myths. So these myths are not something dead on a shelf. It's not a dusty book. They are alive and vital right now.
And cross-cultural also.
I would say that there's cultural influences. Like if someone's having an owl experience in a adobe hut in Arizona, they're going to have a different experience than someone in an apartment in London.
But it spans different cultures
Yes.
is what I'm implying. And as I said, in the world of shamanism, owls are real powerful helping spirits, and in unusual ways too, not in the typical shamanic way. By shamanic way, I mean not in the typical medicine way of just the symbolism of it, but in some real powerful and deep work. I know that you are sought after and you speak at conferences and you are interviewed everywhere, and do you have anything coming up that people might look for? Are you speaking at any or presenting at any conferences?
There's a couple conferences coming up. But what I'm working on presently is I've had a blog for a decade, and there's about 900 posts on that blog, and I went through and looked at some of these posts, and some of them are really wonderful. So I've been working. It's a bigger project than I thought it would be. So within the next few months or a month or so, there should be a book, probably just an ebook, but it'll be a collected set of my writings. And in a way, those are my autobiography of my UFO contact experiences, as well as the owl research.
Okay, wonderful. And your contact info will be shared with people at the end of the show. It will scroll by. People can contact you, and just
if
you need
anyone,
more people.
Yeah, and if anyone needs
More work.
if anyone has an owl story, I want to hear it. And all you have to do, you don't need to remember my name. Just search out UFOs, owls, and you're gonna find me.
Okay, so author, researcher, experiencer, Mike Cleland. Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing, and we're going to get you on some future shows.
Okay, great.
You'll see. Thanks for joining us on the Sacred Journey. See you next time.